The second set of fish notes, and we're going to go over mostly fish reproduction and then a few other random things about fish. We're going to start with respiratory and circulatory system basics with fish. So fish have gills to obtain oxygen and give off carbon dioxide, something that you probably already knew. Fish have an outer covering called the operculum that protects their gills, or the feathery gills, like more inside the body. And then fish are going to have a 2-chambered heart versus like humans, we've got a 4-chambered heart. So their heart is technically less complex than what we've got. For sharks, they're going to have gill slits, which are different than the gills of like bony fish. And then sharks actually are going to have to continuously swim in order to force water over their gills. If they're not continuously swimming, then they're unable to take in oxygen from the water. Like once they've already pulled the oxygen out of that one spot and given off carbon dioxide, they've got to go to a new spot. Like they can't just sit in that one spot and expect to just have oxygen to breathe. All right. Now to go into fish reproduction, and we're going to talk about some different types of reproduction that they go through. So the first is catadromonous fish. These guys are going to live in fresh water and breed in salt water. And an example of a fish that does this is the American eel. On the opposite of that, you have anadromous fish that are going to live mostly in salt water, but they're going to go to breed in fresh water like salmon are going to do. Then some different types of like birth they give. So there's oviparous or parus that are animals, not just fish, but we're focused on fish right now, that these guys are going to lay eggs and they're going to hatch outside of the mother's body. Then there's going to be ovoviviparous, which are animals whose young are born alive after they develop an egg inside the mother's body. So they're in the egg in the body, and then but they're technically born alive. Then there's going to be viviparous, which are animals that bear live young that are nourished directly by the mother's body as they develop, like humans do. So with ovoviviparous, these guys experience, or some of them experience some weird stuff, like ophagy, which is the practice of embryos feeding on eggs produced by the ovary while they're still in the uterus, which is what mako sharks will do. And then there's also interuterine cannibalism, which is when the first embryo that develops will then consume both the other developing eggs and other developed embryos. So like gray nurse sharks will do this. So it's basically like whoever's first then eats everybody else, which is just a little bit terrifying. All right. Some other stuff is about fish are male live bears will have an organ called a gonopodium for internal fertilization. Right. Some unusual breeders will be mouth breeders, which are fish that are going to carry the fertilized eggs in their mouth until the young can cope with life. The incubating the eggs usually will fall onto the males in this case. It won't be the females. Tilapia are an example of a fish that does this, and the males will hold the eggs in his mouth until they hatch, and if the babies don't scatter fast enough once they hatch, he'll actually eat them. So he carries them around in his mouth for a while, and then they hatch, and if they don't get away from their dad fast enough, then the dad's going to eat them. So that's just a little bit unusual. All right. The next one is pouch breeders, and these guys are going to carry their fertilized eggs in a pouch, and this is one that I feel is a very common example of seahorses. So female seahorses will lay their eggs into the male's brood pouch, and the eggs will develop for about 2 to 6 weeks, depending on the species, until they're fully formed. He'll then shoot out the babies from his pouch, and it looks like he's the one giving birth, but he's technically just like carrying around like a sea kangaroo, right? Some other weird things that fish will do is that they kind of build nests like birds. So male betta fish will actually do this, and they'll blow an elaborate bubble nest in the water when they're ready to spawn. And the male will continue to tend to their bubble nest, spitting eggs that fall out of the nest back into the nest. So they're very like protective of their eggs and will like protect it with bubbles. Right. Then there's fatal breeding, which like salmon do, is they're just going to go off and breed and then they die afterwards. Like their whole mission in life is to go breed and then they die. So that's called fatal breeding. Salmon are born in freshwater. They migrate to saltwater to breed, and then they'll return to the same place they were born by swimming upstream and leaping over waterfalls to get there. Once they spawn, though, they'll die shortly after, so they don't make the trek back to the saltwater. Right. Another unusual breeder is the fish that are simultaneously hermaphroditic. So this fish is born both male and female. An advantage of this for especially deep sea fish is that they generally are going to have a low population density, so there's not going to be a lot of other fish around. In order to keep their species alive, since they can be one or the other, male or female, that once they find another fish, they're good. Right. Then there's the sequential hermaphrodites or hermaphroditic fish that can change sexes. So fish that go from males to females, like an anemone fish, like clownfish. So in Finding Nemo, when Nemo's dad, when all those eggs were lost, supposedly that Nemo's dad should have technically then transitioned to be a female because that's what these sea anemone fish typically do in that instance. They can also change from being females to male, like parrotfish will do this. So they don't change back, they just go, like they'll change once and then they're good. All right. Some things about protection is that they can be camouflaged. Many fish have colors or patterns that match their backgrounds. Some fish can even change color to match different backgrounds to hide from prey. To plan like an ambush or something, or hide from a predator. So like there's a fish right here in the middle of this, and it's kind of hard to spot for a predator. Right. Then we've talked about this in the beginning of the year, but there's counter shading where many fish are dark on top and light on the bottom, and seen from above looking down, their darkness blends in with the dark bottom of the ocean, and then when if you're looking up at them, the white underneath blends in with the light from above. Another thing fish will do for protection is swim in schools, and this helps protect them from enemies. It's believed that swimming close together also will reduce the friction with the water and allows the fish to conserve some energy because they can like draft off of each other. It's also helpful that, like, say if there's 50 fish in the school, there's 50 sets of eyes and noses and lateral lines to give this group of fish a better chance at finding dinner and also staying protected. And when fish will spawn, a school ensures that at least some of the eggs will elude predators due to just sheer numbers produced by that large group. So there's just a better chance of survival when they're in a group versus being like riding solo. All right. Another thing for protection are eye spots. This is a form of mimicry, like we talked about in the beginning of the year. And the eye spot is usually going to be found near the tail, and it may be used to draw attention away from the real eye, which is going to be generally a target for predators to attack. Like they'll attack the eyes. So if they have that eye spot on the back, it makes their eye look much larger than it is, makes them look scary. It also throws off a predator and be like, wait, which is your real eye? Right. Then there's also going to be fish that have warning coloration, and a lot of bright fish are going to use the bright warning coloration to advertise to others that they're venomous and like leave me alone. And generally for fish, the warning colors are going to be red, black, and yellow, are fish that you just don't want to mess with. Some fish or stingrays rather, are gonna have a barb located at the base of their tail that injects venom from a gland through a groove in the spine. And we'll talk about stingrays more on the next set of notes. But beachgoers should do what's called a stingray shuffle by like shuffling your feet in the sand to avoid stepping on the barb directly. So you can see that barb here and here that I would not want that on my foot. The serrated edges of the barb make it difficult to pull the barb out. So you can see here that the way they're spiked, that when you're it's going to go, this end will go in your foot first, but then those edges make it even more painful to pull back out. Another issue with this is that like this causes obviously a cut in your foot, and then you get bacteria in there and it gets infected. So not only are you getting like the venom in there, you're getting a lot of bacteria and it's on your foot, which makes it difficult to walk. And it's this like snowball effect that it just is a really bad time. So, but that's it for the second set of fish notes. That's it.